Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Improving Tech Candidate Engagement with Outreach Optimization. Thank you for joining us today. We're very glad you're here. I am Courtney Patterson, Senior Content Strategist here at DICE, and I'm honored to be joined today by two wonderful panelists who I will introduce in just a moment. But first, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar today and we'll provide you with the recording via email within the next 24 hours. So watch for that email. Feel free to share this recording with colleagues, your team, anyone that you feel may benefit from the information that's presented today. We also anticipate having time to answer any questions that you may have near the end of the webinar. So we invite you to submit any questions that you have for the panelists during the webinar today using the questions dropdown in the webinar control panel on your screen. And then after the webinar today, you'll receive an email with a short feedback survey, and your responses help us evaluate how helpful the content was and how we can improve DICE webinars moving forward. We read every single response and we thank you in advance for your feedback. And then lastly, we will be sharing some slides during today's webinar with some pretty detailed information that you may want to reference again. The slides are available for download using the handouts dropdown on your webinar control panel. And I highly recommend if at any point during the webinar there's something on a slide that you'd like to reference again later on, or maybe share with a colleague, to download those slides. All right. Now I would like to introduce you to our panelists today and let each of them kind of give you just a little bit of information about their experience in the tech recruiting space. Tricia Jepsen is a Talent Acquisition Sourcing Supervisor at DISH, and Larry Hernandez is the founder of Recruiter DNA. Tricia, I will start with you. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience with tech recruiting?
Sure. My name is Tricia Jepsen, as Courtney said, and I am with DISH. I lead a lovely team of sourcers. I have 9 members on my team, and DISH, we support, the sourcing team supports a variety of roles in the tech industry. So we have entry level all the way up to niche roles. So my experience with tech is just getting that communication out to the potential candidates, making sure we're able to speak the language, have the direct knowledge of the roles that we're sourcing for, and getting candidates engaged and excited about the roles here at DISH.
Great. And Larry?
Yeah, thank you, Courtney. Yeah, my name is Larry Hernandez. I've been tech recruiting and sourcing for about 25 years now. Started off in the agency world, in tech recruiting with Robert Half and some other smaller firms. Then went into RPO for Accenture. So that was my bridge between agency and in-house. And then went in-house, starting as a tech recruiter with USAA. And then that's when sourcing became big. Started the first sourcing program in Las Vegas for Zappos. And then, did the same with Rackspace. Most recently, I've done some contract technical sourcing with Microsoft, and most recently was a full-time senior tech sourcer at Twitter, really focusing on diversity sourcing and just kind of bringing down walls in the process to help the team be better.
Awesome. Thank you both. It's really great to have you here today. Well, before we jump into the content, here's a quick look at the flow of today's webinar. We will start by talking about outbound outreach, focusing on 2 questions that will help recruiters master outbound outreach: what to say to candidates, and then how to say it based on personality types. And then we'll talk about process improvement, where Larry and Tricia will share some tactics that they employ to making their recruiting processes more efficient, and as a result, improving candidate engagement with their outreach. And then we'll spend some time at the end of the webinar answering questions, as I mentioned. So remember to submit any questions you have throughout the webinar using the questions drop down in your control panel. So let's move into outbound outreach. Let's talk about some tactics that will help messages stand out in a sea of content and noise that is in today's tech job market. Larry, in preparing for this webinar, you shared kind of a simplified way to think about outbound outreach. And I know it will be really helpful for a lot of attendees listening today. You kind of told us that you break outbound outreach into two different kind of subcategories: what to say, and how to say it. So you've got some great visualizations to share here, and they're a little complex, so I'm going to let you kind of walk us through it. But on this first slide, if you could just walk us through this process of kind of how you think about what you would say to a candidate, and then on the next couple of slides, I know you've got some more visualizations about how you say something based on a personality type.
Awesome. Yes. And so when I put this slide together, the main point is if I'm a consultant, or maybe you have come in to solve a sourcing problem, or we need more candidates, I just kind of want to set the framework to say, I'm assuming that you are really, really, really good sourcers, and that you've really built good search strings, and you found your talent pool, whether that's in Ohio, whatever it is. As recruiters, we get these long lists of requirements, and I want to make the point that there's only so many candidates that are going to be interested, qualified, and available for your position. Sometimes as managers, we're like, we need more, we need more tools, we need more sourcers, right? Thinking that that's the problem. If you look at this diagram, this is basically a funnel, right? We've all heard of funnels. I'm assuming that you've done a great job and you found 500 candidates. That's what's in the top left in the purple. You've got 500 candidates in whatever tool or tools you use, and you're in a rush and you've got to get these contacts, so you hit send, right? And these are very optimistic rates. I'm going to take you through the flow, and these are very optimistic rates. So we measure emails in a couple of different ways. Is my email, my outbound reach, is it successful? Well, number one, did they open the email, right? And let's just say you have a 29% open rate. Well, that's 149 candidates. So we've already gone from 500 to 149 just like that, okay? And let's say you've got a 20% reply rate. They actually hit reply. Even if they say no thank you, that's a win for us because they've replied. No matter what they say, that's how we measure reply rate. Let's say 20%. So now we're at 17 candidates. And these numbers, by the way, are pretty high. That means you probably work for a company like Meta, or someone who has a big name in whatever market you're serving. So they're gonna let me at least get back to this recruiter, right? And then so that's what I want to focus on. If you were to keep going, let's just say 80% of the candidates apply. Well, now we're only at 13 candidates, and then it goes on, your phone screens, your text screens, but really we've gotten one person to on-site with 500 candidates, okay? So, are we gonna get 1,000 to get 2? Are we gonna get, this math, it's pretty amazing when you break it down. And so I just wanted to say, number one, it's so important that we communicate and we take care of this talent pool, because there probably isn't 1,000 of them. Okay, so that was the main slide. And just to let you know, in reality, open rates, and you can look in your LinkedIn recruiter, and you can look at, hopefully you've got some kind of email software that's measuring this, because if you're not measuring it, we don't know is Larry doing good, is Larry doing bad, right? And so I do recommend that everyone on this call just think about how much time of our day we're sending out emails. I think we need to take it seriously and start studying it. So I don't expect everyone to memorize this, but hopefully it's an aha moment, like, we need to start thinking like this is our profession, like we are outbound marketers or outbound salespeople. So that was just a quick context slide. If we could move to the next slide, it'll start making sense on how we say it. I've been doing this for 20-something years. My wife's a recruiter, right? I'm a recruiter. Yet we're totally different personalities. So a lot of times you're a recruiter and you're typing and you're just doing the best you can. So we talk, like right now I'm talking with my hands. I get excited. Well, if you're familiar with the personality model, the DISC personality model, if you're real familiar with it, you go, oh, Larry's an I. He's outgoing, he's enthusiastic, he's optimistic. In my experience, recruiters are either I's or they're D's. And those are the two. D and I's are your extroverts. They're smiling in their LinkedIn picture. They use emojis. They talk with their hands. Unfortunately, most of our tech candidates are in the other half of the module. They're introverts, even-tempered, patient. Me talking like this would probably turn them off. So the big aha moment I had years ago was, I've got to in order to really communicate, they have to receive the message. So there's all this, even in preparing for this webinar, Trish and Courtney and I were like, do you like long messages, short messages? What should I do? Should I put a smiley face? And I guess the number one message I want to give to the audience is do your homework. Okay, I've given you some tools. There are tools like Crystal knows that when you open up a LinkedIn profile, I can click a button and it'll tell me Trisha's personality. It'll tell me Courtney's personality. And it'll tell you how should I email them about a job, right? So that's why I have that little map here where it says Larry. It shows the Crystal Knows software says, oh, your candidate is conscientious and you are influential. Okay, so we're going to be coming from different angles. Remember the last slide. We've only got this many people to talk to. We can't afford to turn off 30% of our candidates. So I want you to be able to understand, know your audience, talk to your audience the way they want to be talked to. And you'll be surprised how these numbers start to move. And I think we have a link at the end of the slides. And there's other apps and there's other models, but this is just to get your mind thinking. Whenever you guys are on internal teams, I like short messages. I like long messages. Have an experiment, start it, and test it. And I think you'll start seeing some different results.
And that's something that we kind of chatted about when we were, Larry and I kind of connected, was do the A/B testing. My team here at Dish, we do, some team members do the short, found your profile, here's a link to the role. Or a more expand your experience at company X, you would be a great fit for this role at Dish. So it's, do that A/B testing as you're reaching out to candidates and get to know what the tech talent, they want the short and sweet. They want to know what's the role, what's the team that I'm going to work for, what's the projects I'm going to be doing. All the extra fluff that comes down the road. So do that A/B testing and just really feed into, I'm an I'm an ID person in the DISC profile, so I know, Larry and I talked about that the tech talent is just, they're in that CCS area. So where do your candidate that you're reaching out to, where do they lie, and how are we going to connect with them?
Yeah, and what Tricia's talking about, which is super important, is when we say A/B testing, if you're not familiar with that, there is some software. If you were a professional email marketer, or if you hired a marketing agency to get the word out about an event, they would have the software that would say, okay, let's build 2 messages, right? And usually on an A/B test, version A, version B, everything would be the same, and you'd want to test one thing, like the subject line, right? Just something very small. In doing some research for this call, and remember that first slide, we only have 20, 30% can make a huge difference. So if you add the candidate's first name in the subject line, studies show you will get a 20% increase in your reply rate. So instead of going and getting 500 new candidates, right? Because it's sourcing. I need more candidates. Get an agency. We need to get better at communicating with the people we do have, right? So just something like that. And I know it's a lot to throw at you, but start Googling, not right now, of course, but after the webinar, start Googling email response rates, best practices, industry averages, and encourage you to experiment, get out of your comfort zone. Have your partner to your right write the email. Ask around. Hey, how many people are we? What is your open rate? Can I borrow your email? Like, start working as a team, and you will find that certain individuals in your team communicate better with certain candidate pools.
Exactly. And dare I ask, do we try Chat GPT, Larry? I sometimes, if I run a wall in my messaging, I think we're going to touch on Chat GPT later, a little bit later. But if I'm hitting the wall, like my messages aren't hitting the mark, I will ask what is a great message to reach candidate X with. 5G is a hot item right now that I'm trying to find candidates for. Where can I find these candidates? What's a good messaging approach to reach the candidates? And make let Chat GPT give you a little bit of information, but then make the message your own so that the candidate will know it's not an AI message as well.
That's a good point. We are living in the golden age of technology. Someone like myself, who unfortunately is not a great writer, I would rather talk than write. So when I have a bunch of emails to send out, sometimes that blinking blank screen, I kind of freeze and I overthink it, right? So some of the things I've done in the past is, okay, so let's just say 5G. We're looking for engineers who are working on 5G. Mm-hmm. What I'll do is I'll Google 5G and I'll look at the vendors who are supporting that world. That makes sense. So Verizon and I'll look at the tech vendors. I look at the pictures they're using because they have a bigger marketing budget than Larry does. And I'll even sign up for their newsletters to see how they're communicating with that world. And then I'll kind of borrow from that style, right? It's not necessarily the silver bullet, but the goal is it's never going to stop. You're always going to be, tinkering with this machine. And eventually you're always going to be optimizing, changing it. I'm going to change the subject line. Should I put a link to my calendar, or should I put a link? You're going to be testing. Do they click on it? The thing is, probably your ATS and CRM probably isn't able to track that, right? So that's something that if you're an in-house, the bigger the company you work for, the more that they have you tied. Security has you tied down where you can't use tools. If you're in an agency, a smaller agency, or independent consultant, you have a little bit more free reign, but either way, it's the mindset you have of always testing and trying new things.
Yeah, and Larry, we have a quick question I think it would be good to ask now while we're on the topic. One attendee is asking, should you put the candidate's first name only in the subject line or first and last name?
We could test that. I would say, just from experience, this is kind of technical, kind of nerdy. You probably have a list somewhere of candidates that you've gotten somewhere. A lot of times the first initial is wrong and the last name could have so I think just stick with the first name is better, but depending on who it is, you could try Mr. or Mrs. and then last name. I want you to experiment it. I have just, you've only got so much real estate. That subject line is huge, okay? It's the equivalent of your job title when you post a job, which is another webinar. What should our job postings be, right? But it's like thinking like a marketer. So first name, I like to leave no surprises, right? So, message for Larry / 5G engineering question, or this has been this. I wasn't going to share this. I'm working on a project right now that I've got a 67% open rate. I just tried this. I put candidate's first name, meet Larry, a good tech recruiter connection. It just changed the whole thing. It's almost like, is someone introducing me to Larry? Anyway, so you kind of think outside the box and test things. But I think first name would be good.
I would agree with that. I think first name is good. And I don't know, Larry, you may have noticed this as well, but as you're sourcing tech talent, they will have misspellings of names, etc. So you really need to pay attention to that, because I may have something misspelled and I'm doing like a mass message, And now I've reached out to all of these candidates, and it's been a misrepresentation of myself because I didn't accurately look at their profile. So I don't know if you've come
Yeah.
across that as well, Larry, but that's
No.
always look
Number
for
one,
misspellings or the tech. I think my tech people try to not trick me, but make me engage them and make sure I'm verifying everything on their profiles.
Definitely. Yeah. If you look at the disc, if you look at the C's and the S's, there, the C's, a lot of software developers and auditors and engineers will be in that C area. So they're analytical, and they're precise. So any little spelling error just throws them off, right? So I'm a horrible speller. So yes, I use Grammarly to check everything. It checks my tone. It checks, it checks my how I sound, but run it by someone else, before you hit send. I have sent thousands of emails, and I'm like, oh, thank goodness they're in my campaign. And then I look, oh no, I misspelled something in my title. I beat myself up, and I'm like, okay, don't do this again, right?
Exactly.
So make a little small test. Do a small test to people. Try your applicants first, because they're already in your application, they're already in your ATS. Warm it up. They're a little bit more forgiving. They know who you are. They know your brand, before you kind of go out.
Yeah, and I think we have one more slide here that's a little
Definitely.
more in terms of like if
Yeah.
people are looking for really tangible examples here. And
Right.
like I mentioned, feel free to, all the attendees on today, feel free to use the handouts drop down. You can download all of these slides to reference later on too. So if you kind of need, like Larry mentioned, if staring at a blank page is a little overwhelming, here's something to kind of get you started.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is fascinating. So I went real deep into the personality traits, and for more sourcing. But that same software, Crystal knows, once you get that persona, it gives you what to do, what that candidate or person likes, and what they don't like. And then I realized, well, there's 4 personalities, and I put little color codes. Something like share an interesting story, persona A. It says do that. But then if you look at persona C, it says don't tell a story, because it's going to turn them off. And that was my aha moment. I want to be me. I want to start with the story. Hey, are you from Texas? I'm from Texas. You have bulldogs. Well, that's okay if your candidate audience is the same personality type. But this is a very simple case where being me is going to turn off personality C. And wow, what an aha moment was, and this is not just for recruiting, this is for life. I'm like, that's why my
Exactly.
wife doesn't like it. When we're trying to communicate, but our styles are different. So it's helpful to kind of look at how something is a positive, and then when you're dealing with a new job, a new open rec, um, you know, look at your hiring managers, put your hiring managers into Crystal Knows, and it'll give you your hiring manager's personality, and then get the hiring panel. There's going to be 3 people on this panel: Courtney, Larry, and Tricia. Put all 3 of us in Crystal Knows, and now you can prep your candidate. Listen, Larry talks with his hands, do this, do that. And so now you're kind of looking under the covers. You're taking away the mystery of recruiting and I'm trying to put some science into this. And it's not always perfect, but at least it's a good start.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead,
And
Courtney.
well, and I was going to ping over to you, Tricia, too. You mentioned ChatGPT. And before we kind of move into process improvement, I
Sure.
definitely want to hear some of the thoughts you have around outbound outreach, too, and maybe specifically some of those channels or tools that you're using that maybe you weren't using 2 or 3 years ago, even.
Yeah. So here on the Dish team, for our sourcing team, we're kind of taking the philosophy of our outbound outreach quality candidates. So we're really looking at their profiles, getting an in-depth understanding of their experience versus that spam approach we may have took a year ago. Like, I'm just going to send hundreds of messages to candidates. Hopefully somebody answers me. And now we're really leaning into looking at the credentials of the candidate. Are they a job hopper? Do they have the skills that we're looking for prior to our outreach? And we're really focusing our outreach on the candidate works at X company, and I noticed your experience at company X makes you a great fit for this role. And then as they get the conversation going, then we set up that pre-screen, and then we just really get to know the candidate and share about the role and what they would be doing in their role here. So we started out with that email communication and then shift to that phone communication. And then so that way the candidate has that, they know I'm a real person. It's not a spam email. It's not somebody pretending to work at Dish. It's an actual person that works at Dish, knows about the Dish culture, knows about the role, knows about the role that they're going to step into, and just really gets them interested in that role. Another thing, you know, I'm still, ChatGPT is new. I'm learning it. I'm working with it with my team, and really, how can we lean into it? We have some very niche technical roles that we're trying to find. I attended a training where they encouraged us to ask ChatGPT the top 5 companies where you can find this great tech talent. I asked ChatGPT, that doesn't really give me what I want. So, you know, times it works, times it doesn't. You can ask ChatGPT to create Boolean. I've used some of the Booleans, but it doesn't narrow it down like a sourcer has that ability to. So, I mean, that's a tool we didn't use last year. It's a tool that we're using here on the team. We're not leaning into it every day, but it's a tool that we're leaning into to make those changes to our communication. So that's a tool that we're using that we didn't use. And then I've kind of over the year, Courtney, you asked about what we use that we haven't used. And so everyone knows in sourcing, there's all these great tools, all these great trainings that we attend, and it's a little bit overwhelming. And so I've asked my team this year just to really, let's get back to the basics and get back to our core knowledge. And so we're using, you know, we have LinkedIn Recruiter, we have Dice that we're using, we have Indeed. And so I find some of these platforms, LinkedIn is oversaturated. We all know that. LinkedIn Recruiter that's the go-to. It's been oversaturated by the market. So I tend to lean into Dice. It's my gold mine. And then CRM, our candidate relationship management that we have here as well. And then I also use our cross-check. I don't know if there's members on the call that have their references, that we reach out for references. If you have someone that's interested as a reference for someone and they're interested in your company or your agency, they can mark on there, I'm interested in learning more about roles at Dish. So we're leaning into that and looking in every day. Hey, Larry, I saw that you were a reference for candidate X. You're interested in roles at Dish. How can we get that conversation going? So it's just really, for me, it's, you know, you can use all these great and amazing tools, but if you keep it simple and get back to basics in sourcing, it just, you're able to find all these successes and, you know, sprinkle in all these fun nuances, but then just really hold true to what you know and then just keep expanding on it.
That's great. And Larry, I know that you also have some thoughts on automation and ChatGPT, so please chime in.
Yeah, no, so I'm a nerd and I love testing things and trying things. But like Tricia said, a lot of the, you know, if you go to SourceCon or a lot of the blogs, and I found myself doing this too. I focus, I get excited about new stuff, right? And I bring it back to the team and they're like, oh no, Larry's got a new tool, right? So my advice is, you know, take a step back to your process. If you're a manager or a team lead, take a step back and really try to find out, where are we having trouble? You know, like if you have a one-on-one, it's like, okay, Larry, where are we with this rec or with this open position? And I'm like, well, I've got the candidates. You know, whatever it is, find the process or the point where it's not working. Maybe technology can help you with that. Maybe it can't. But it's like if I were to come to you as a salesman and I had all these new, we'll just say tools. I've got this, pocket knife that has all these things. You're like, oh my gosh, I gotta have it. And then you're sitting there and you're looking around the house like, how can I use this tool? So it's not necessarily try to ask yourself, what is the problem that we are trying to solve? Is it a technology issue? Is it an internal issue? Is it a me issue? So just think that, because you will get overwhelmed with the amount of tools coming out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And those are such good, important considerations too to think about. There's so many tools out there. Tricia, to your point, it's easy to get overwhelmed. And Larry, to your point, testing things, seeing if it works for you. If it doesn't, move on to another tool. We have about 15 minutes left, so I do want to shift over to process improvement too. Yeah, so it's always important, obviously, to consider the candidate's current perspective. We kind of talked about that already with Larry's slides of depending on where a candidate is in the process, they may not even open your email if they're not looking for a job or they're not ready to apply. So Tricia, as we were preparing for this webinar, you shared a really good point about partnership and how the relationship between the sourcer, recruiter, and hiring manager is critical to successful processes. So can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of that partnership, but also how that specifically plays out at DISH?
Sure. So we actually have started a model here at DISH that when a new requisition is open, the sourcers have teams that they're partnered with. So they have recruiters, we have various business lines that we support. So my team members are partnered with recruiters. And so a rec is open, and my team, we go to that intake meeting. We have that ability to ask questions about must-haves. What is the ideal candidate? If you could have your ideal candidate, what would they have and what skill set do they need? And so then we may not be sourcing for the role right away, but we have that knowledge needed to, and we're armed with, hey, 30, 60 days down the road, we have to go out there and source for that. Along with that partnership with the recruiters, a lot of work that the sourcing team is doing is we're creating those sourcing strategies. And then we have the ability to attend those intake meetings or re-intake meetings with the hiring managers and share, hey, I've been sourcing on this rec for 30 days. None of my candidates are quite hitting the mark. And you're able to share your profiles that you've had, resumes that you've had, and then on site. A lot of the candidates in the market we're transitioning back to on site. And so what are those barriers that we're running into? So I really encourage my team to drive the strategy and how they're creating that strategy and that partnership with the recruiters and the hiring manager, because it really, ultimately we're submitting candidates to get past the finish line for the roles.
Yeah, and Larry, sorry, I didn't mean to go to the next slide that quickly, but you had some great points too about how you incorporate the buyer's journey, which you have this kind of great visualization for everyone to kind of better understand, because it can be very complex. But can you tell us a little bit about the buyer's journey, and then in the context of improving your processes, how you kind of use that when you're thinking about your recruiting process?
Yeah, sure. So this was a huge, another big aha moment, that I was actually doing some talent acquisition marketing, and came across this theory called inbound marketing by HubSpot, and they have a lot of cool free resources. But when I saw this model, and what they've done is they've said whenever someone is going to make an important decision, buying a house, marriage, switching jobs, a big life event, that we as humans, we don't just say, I'm going to switch my job and start applying. We go through these 4 cycles. So number one is, awareness. Do I even have a problem, right? And I use myself as an example. I used to have a full set of hair, and I would get emails or see commercials or billboards that said, oh, hair replacement, or 10% off, 20% off. But I wasn't there yet. I wasn't even aware that I was balding. So any message that I got at that time was spam to me, or I didn't even see it. And then that got me thinking about all the emails that we send to candidates. So I get emails all the time that say, hey, I've got this job, looked at your LinkedIn, you're great. Send me your resume. Well, see, they're over here assuming I'm in the green, take action. So they're assuming oh my goodness, I need to change my job. I wonder if I could transfer internally, or if I should move to a different department. And then decisions, okay, I'm gonna do something about it. Let me see, where I should work, and then I'm gonna take action. If you skip any color, that's spam. That's spam to the person. So we've all been there. Larry, where are we on this rec? Oh my gosh, send 500 emails. And all my messaging is geared towards action. Apply now. Join our community. You're asking. I don't even know who you are. And so this was a big aha moment. No wonder only 3%, 5%, 20% of people are reacting with me, because out of that 500 people that I picked, they are segmented in these individual stages. So now it got me thinking, hey team, what do we share on social media? And start thinking about it. Oh, best places to work, great culture, PTO, that's all over here when they're already at the end. And so you've noticed when you're dealing with candidates in your ATS that have applied, their questions, you get those questions. How much does it pay? Is it remote? Is it W-2? We are already way over here under actions, right? But we're missing a huge population. So maybe we start talking about commute time, growth opportunities, the things we share about our company and share to our audience has to line up with these individuals, with these different segments. So don't be afraid to email and ask questions and start to figure out, if I were a 5G engineer, they might not even know that they're underpaid. Hey, are you being underpaid? Want a salary survey? Do you work too far from home? Would you want to work remote? These type things, right? So that was a big aha moment for me.
Yeah, those are really great takeaways. And I know that we've mentioned a few tools too today, and we did proactively include a slide here so that anyone who's having questions about, hey, what was that tool that you mentioned? What does it do? And again, if you download using the handouts section of your control panel, you can click on all of these links from the PDF that you download. And I know we've mentioned a couple more, Grammarly, and we can include those in the follow-up email too, so that you're all aware of what we've talked about today. And I know we have about a little less than 10 minutes left, and we do have some questions that have come in. So we'll try to get to as many as we can before the end of the webinar. So this first one, I think it's going to be really good for you, Tricia, coming from a direct hire position currently.
Sure.
The question is, what does the recruiting process look like in your organization for technical roles? How many rounds of interviews are there, and who is included in the interviews?
So it varies on the role. I know that's kind of the canned answer. So the process that we have here at Dish is my team, we do the initial outreach to the candidates that we're sourcing on. We do a high-level pre-screen to make sure that candidate that we have has the talent that we need before we hand them off to the recruiter. They do more in-depth pre-screen. And then after the recruiters do that pre-screen, then they will send them to the hiring manager. There could be times where it's just the hiring manager interview or that panel interview. And so it varies by the hiring manager and that role. So there's not a definite, there's like 4 or 5 different levels of the interview process. For us, the big thing for the sourcing team is to make sure that we've done our due diligence pre-screening the candidates, getting the candidate interested in the role at Dish, educating them about the role before we hand them off to the recruiter for that more in-depth pre-screen.
That makes sense. Thanks, Tricia.
Sure.
Yeah, and Larry, this next question will be great for you, coming from an agency perspective. Alternatively, the question is, sometimes a delayed response from from a client result in losing a skilled candidate since they don't last long in the market? Do you have any tips for overcoming this?
Yes. So the first thing that my ears popped up is understand that the candidate pool you're working with, if they're moving fast, if they have other offers, you're probably working with, and I hate to use this word, I've never liked it, active candidates, right? But they're already making decisions, right? They're already, so number one, all you can do is tell the candidates, listen, this is a newer client of mine. They're going through this, be honest. My client, they're super busy. That's why they're using us, right? So you got to bear with me. I got you. We're going to hurry up and then we're going to wait. We're going to hurry up and we're going to wait. So please text me, if something's going to change, I understand, let me know. And I'll use that to go, have my client hurry up a little bit. And then at the same time, you're turning around to the client and you're saying, these particular candidates that match all of our requirements and, they have other offers. Sometimes if you look at your disc map, that will turn off your hiring manager and they'll be like, hey, don't back me into a corner. That happens a lot with aggressive recruiters that are Ds when they're dealing with an introvert. People don't like to be pushed into a corner. So you just say, Mr. Mrs. Client, help me, let's work together. What should I do? What do you think we should do? Is there anything we can do? Can they talk to someone on your team to let them know? What can we do? Or are you okay with having them, we miss out, just know it's going to take us another 90 days because we only have 500 candidates. Show them the map, 500 candidates, only 17 are interested in your company, only 3 of them made it past the phone screen. So what do you want to, work with them, right? And don't get discouraged. This is an ongoing thing, right? So yeah, try to head everything off at the beginning so they'll trust you. I always tell the client managers, this particular individual, we caught him in the active stage. The market's hot. They're interviewing with this team. They wouldn't share with me who. So know that even before you screen them. Don't surprise them with it.
Yeah, open lines of communication is always good.
Yes.
Good.
And that's even, and kind of to piggyback on our interview process here at Dish, that communication is key to let candidates know where they're at in the process. A lot of times the sourcing team members will get questions, where am I at? And so it's just keeping, kind of ties back to the agency with Larry, keeping that candidate warm, like keeping them engaged where they're at in that process.
Yeah, more and more, because I've been agency, but I was a full-time employee at Twitter. It used to be agency world was so different. Okay. Now they're a lot alike in the tech industry, in a hyper competitive industry. Basically, in-house sourcing teams and recruiters are mini agencies within. They're even measured the same way, if not more so. So yeah, this goes both ways. Every Friday, hopefully your ATS can automate some of this. Send your hiring managers a State of the Union. Hey, hope you're having a happy Friday. Here are your requirements. Here's where we're at. Feel free to contact me. And then every candidate, even if it's kind of a template, if you're working with hundreds and thousands, Friday's coming up. Really thank you. I don't know anything, but I didn't want to go silent on you. Let me know if anything's changed. Have a great weekend. Just at least don't let anything go a week without at least communicating.
Yeah, great points. And I see that we're getting pretty close to the 45 mark. And I hate that we didn't get to too many questions, but I'll definitely share the questions that have come in with both of you so that you can reach out if you choose to. We can also reach out from DICE as well. I'm also getting some questions about the handouts. It seems that that's not working. So I will make sure that in the follow-up email, we'll include some sort of a link that you can download those slides. So don't worry if you weren't able to take any screenshots. We'll make sure that you get those handouts. So I just want to thank you both so much for being on this webinar today. You've both shared such insightful thoughts and a lot of tactical applications that hopefully all of these attendees that were here today and that are going to listen or watch on demand will benefit from. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I always learn. I always learn when I attend these. So
Yeah,
Yes.
good. Yeah, and hopefully everybody here today has learned something. And I do just want to say a reminder here that we are sending a recording of this webinar. So if there was something that your team could benefit from, maybe a colleague, a friend, once you get that recording, feel free to forward that email on, send the link to them so that they can also view the recording. And then we'll send that follow-up email with handouts, links to all of these tools, and you'll also receive that feedback survey. Again, we read every response. It's how we choose the content that is featured on these webinars, how we evaluate how helpful it was. So we really appreciate in advance any feedback that you're willing to share with us. And then if you're interested in learning about DICE solutions, that's also an opportunity for you to say, hey, I'd love to hear from the DICE team. So if that interests you at all, make sure you click on that feedback survey as well, coming out in probably about 15 to 20 minutes. So that is all I have for us today. Again, thanks so much, Larry and Tricia, for joining us today. And for everyone on the call, thanks for watching, thanks for tuning in. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.
Bye, everybody.
bye, everyone.